Welcome to the HR Dialogues, a podcast where we talk about HR and the future of work. I'm your host, Dr. Veldsman, and today we've got an exciting episode lined up where we will be talking about artificial intelligence and how the democratization of learning is changing the way that organizations think about development. I will be joined today by the CEO and co-founder of Dextego, Ioanna Mantzouridou Onasi, and she will share what they are doing in terms of building an AI-driven coaching platform. Welcome to the HR Dialogues, where we learn from people practitioners as they navigate the emerging world of work. Ioanna, welcome to the HR Dialogues.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, Dieter. Thank you.
As a kickstart, tell us a bit about what does Dextego do?
Yes, Dextego is an AI coaching platform that balances AI with a human touch in order to, as you said very well, democratize learning, in particular soft skills learning, and help companies retain their top talent.
That's great. And I think that's very relevant for our audience and exactly what we want to deep dive into today. So, Ioanna, maybe as a bit of context, I think something we are all seeing in the environment is there's this question around how AI is going to change the way that we learn. On the one side, there's the argument to say AI is the future, human skills and soft skills are no longer important. And on the other side, really this perspective that we have to almost celebrate our humanness in terms of the skills as well. I want to kickstart just by asking the question, what does the digital learning landscape look like today?
I think there are two big things going on. There is a change we see coming from the HR professionals, and then there's a change coming from the people, employees worldwide. I mean, we saw, what was it, in May of 2023, there were like 4 million people that decided to quit their jobs. And I think this is super connected with the fact that they're tired of not being heard, of not having their emotional needs satisfied at work. And that is also very well connected to soft skills, because we always had these skills and the need to express them. But I feel like for years now, we've been trying to figure out how on paper by researching, doing studies from psychologists to HR people. And like we haven't found a way to really cater to these needs while being productive at work. And so what happens suddenly, you have this burst of AI and it kind of awakened people saying, oh, we do have to take care of these human skills because this is the only thing that really matters today. When you have the technical skills figured out by the machines and AI supporting us in all facets of our lives today, and it will only become bigger, now we have to really look internally and say, okay, what are the skills that I have that I can bring to the table? How do I lead others? How do I communicate with others successfully? And so the digital learning landscape has really moved into figuring out that. And I believe that we're still very early, like there's a huge way to go, because the tools that exist today have been by default catering the HR side. So they have focused on helping, let's say, a head of HR, a chief learning officer, create courses, assign these courses, but there's a lot that's missing, and we'll dive into it in terms of personalization and how we put the employee in the center of digital learning rather than vice versa, checking a box that they did the course. So yeah, that is my high level approach to the shift, but it's here, it's very real, and the numbers show it.
I think especially in the post-pandemic world, consumers have become very much focused on instant gratification. I want everything now and I want it my way, and I want to be able to engage with the world according to my needs and my wants. And that's put organizations under pressure. And I think that's also now entering the employee experience as well as in the learning space. And I think it's exciting for us to think about that, but it definitely is quite a big shift from, the traditional models that you've rightly mentioned. Sometimes was a little bit more orientated towards the organizational and the HR need, and not so much about the individual and what they wanted to do in terms of their own development. Ioanna, talk to me a bit about this big word, democratization of learning. It's a term that gets utilized quite a bit, usually in the context of AI and AI-based learning. Can you demystify that for us a bit?
Yes, it's actually a loaded word. Like some people don't like it. They prefer meritocracy. They prefer other definitions. And I'm fine with everything because the true meaning of it is really giving equal opportunities and equal access to skills that have been kept for a few people that have access to huge mentorship networks, coaching networks, probably had specific education. And now you have, in particular, Gen Z coming in the workplace saying, enough, I don't like the way you guys teach us skills, and saying, I need to also feel like I'm in charge of my learning. The way AI can democratize access is by putting the learner in the forefront and saying, what do you need to learn to be successful? What are your current skills now, and how we can help you get where you have to be without making you feel like you're in a box. So if you're a technical person, you only learn technical skills. Or if you're an artist, you only learn design. Like, democratization of access means everyone has equal access to the skills they need. Now, that doesn't mean everyone will go ahead and learn them and become the best, but at least they have the opportunity. So that, let's say, to give a very simple example, like if we're talking about an interview, a technical person has equal opportunity to express themselves in a non-technical way than someone with a background in business. And so we decrease the bias that exists. We decrease the limitations of career development, and we help people truly be the best they could be, both personally and professionally.
That has, on the one side, also come with the fact that I think the manner in which people learn is very different today than what it was a couple of years ago. Bite-sized learning, personalized content, as you've mentioned, just-in-time content. I think that has become the way that people consume content in this new ecosystem of learning, for lack of a better term and lack of a better word. Something that you mentioned that I think is really important for our listeners also to pay attention to is the fact that in the old world, the more senior I became in the organization, it's as if more opportunities became available. Coaching is a great example, right? Very, very expensive to do, extremely, extremely valuable, but the accessibility towards that solution almost happens once you further in your career, and we kind of leave people to their own devices with generic type of solutions at the entry level stage. You spoke about personalization, we've spoken about individualization. Can we talk a little bit about that, and what's the value there that we add?
Absolutely. So I wanted to add that even if someone is in an organization for like a year or 10 years or whatever the time period is, the number one reason why they will consider staying today based on all the data is because they see growth potential, not just for them, but also for the company. Or else why waste your time in a company that will close tomorrow? And startups is a great example. Startups are able to attract the best of the best talent, even if it's so risky, because they see this potential. And I think the potential that someone has to grow is even greater in the early stages of their career. So I don't understand why we've been coaching and developing only the C-suite when they've already reached the level of learning curve that shows us that there is so much more room to grow. And now you can give access to everyone in the organization and align them on your company's goals. So it's not just separate learning that people do for themselves. It's also, what type of organization do we have to create? What is our main, for instance, learning path? Do we have to develop our teamwork? Do we have to develop our leadership skills? And you align the company, making it much more strong and bonded. So now you have high performance, you have loyalty, and you have a common vision, which is why a lot of companies fail, because usually the leadership knows where they're heading, but the rest of the team doesn't, and that creates conflicts. So I do think a learning organization can really signal to employees that they are now becoming a high performance culture and that they are being measured against that. Versus if you just put learning in the back burner as an extra like benefit or something nice to have, it doesn't have the same effect. And that's why you see low usage and adoption of these tools, because they haven't signaled to the employees the importance. So for instance, in a performance review, you come back and say, hey, Mr. HR, look, I developed my communication skills like 30% since last quarter. That's what I did that worked. And that's how I'm implementing this in the way I talk to my clients as a sales
Mm,
executive. And that I think is powerful because, especially in big companies, it's so hard to see the ROI of training. You
mm.
you just do a webinar, you do a workshop, and people can give you maybe a rating 1 to 10, but you don't know what they learned.
There's a couple of things I want to unpack there, Ioanna, which I think is really important that you've mentioned. And the first one is, you always need an organizational culture that's going to support learning and development for any tool to work. To your point, it's not about the tool set; it's about the things that work around and that enables the tool set. I want to delve into a bit more around the learning culture that you do need to create. Learning organizations. It's something that we've been talking about for a number of years. I think it has been misunderstood for a lot of in a lot of contexts where people say a learning organization is one that offers training solutions, right? Which is definitely not the definition thereof. I'd love your view on how do we really create an authentic learning organization.
To me, it's the adaptability of the learning organization and the continuous aspect of it. So, in our case in Dextego, let's step back a little bit. We have a human skills model where we talk about three areas of skills. The intrapersonal, which are, for instance, your learning agility, how fast you learn, your adaptability. Um, Interpersonal could be communications,
Mm,
the typical soft skills that we hear a lot about online. And then leadership skills, like your ability to motivate others, to lead others, and to influence. And to me, I, I mean, these are all great, and a lot of learning tools focus individually in these areas.
mm,
These are what I call point solutions. But when you interact with someone, all of these skills have to come together. So
mm,
the realistic learning, if you will, is something that brings them all together and takes into account your beliefs, your morals, your values to create an adaptive learning approach and meet you where you are. So by default, the learning organization is one that evolves with its people. Because
mhm,
today, you might be in a good state of mind and you might do, for instance, an exercise about negotiation and kill it. And then tomorrow, your confidence is low and it affects the way you negotiate. So we can't be giving you the same type of exercises. We have to be adapting to where you are. And the way we do it is through experiential learning. So you put a
mm,
person in a situation and you see how they behave and you react to that, which is, I think, the most impactful learning because you will remember it by doing
mm,
something. It's not a passive, okay, I just watch a video or I just read the text and then I try to figure out what I learned. That almost never helps. So, continuous now is the fact that you'll do it every day. You'll do a few minutes. You mentioned earlier micro learning. That's exactly it. A few minutes a day, every day, to see exponential growth over time. And again, back to today, the tools that primarily are being used in organizations are during onboarding, heavy on onboarding, like your first 3 months, you
mm,
might do more hours of learning than you've ever done in your life, and then you forget about it. So there's no impact. We need to embed in an employee's daily routine
mm,
some sort of learning so that they can first be able to react to it if it doesn't work for them sooner than later. And if it does work for them, they have the opportunity to do it daily and see a big impact that can help them become better in their job on a daily basis. And when the time comes for a promotion or for something else, they will reflect back to why they got there. Because today, forget about the classic traditional growth trajectory of someone in an organization. You can't sit as an employee and say, "Oh, I'll definitely in 3 years become a team leader or XYZ."
I love the fact that, because the conversation inevitably leads towards, careers are unfolding very differently. And I think to your point, people have got a lot more choice and a lot more opportunity. but also organizations have got a lot of different types of needs, right? Which is where we're looking for people that are multi-skilled in various components, combining, as you've mentioned, the technical or functional skills with soft skills, with kind of contextual and experiential skills that they learn over time.
Mhm.
So I think there's really a big need, as you've mentioned, to bring all these different things together in the context of who is the human and what does the human need now and how can they move forward, as part of that. Joanna, I want to shift us a little bit towards the conversation that whenever I say AI coaching, you'll get people on the one side that are extremely excited about it. You'll get people on the other side that all of a sudden it's red flags and it's ethical concerns, etc.
Sure. I think people are just cautious. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And then the more they understand what it means, to your point, like when they see a tool and they can play with it, they actually end up liking it, because it's like when you're blind and you see for the first time, you never want to go back to being blind. So it's the same type of experience. I think AI will only get better. That's a fact, actually. So today, the fact that we are able to even play with an AI coach and be in a psychologically safe environment where we can share our thoughts, get some feedback, get some advice is great. It gives
Mm,
access to also a diverse group of people that might not find a right human coach for them. It
mm,
also allows people from all around the world to have access to coaching, and in some countries it might still be, a taboo, or even therapy. Like now they have access to a digital version of a coach that can get them an understanding of how they think, maybe what's wrong with their thinking, provide self-reflection, which is
mm,
something that human coaches not always do. And it's connected to what we said earlier. Like a C-suite person might know how to self-reflect, but an entry-level employee might have no clue where to even start, which is why just reading passively doesn't work. They have to be engaged in a conversation, in a exercise, in a video chat. And I think all the stimuli that people need is now given to them in a very cost-effective way,
mm-hmm,
and it is giving them power to share and say, for instance, that happened to today. Like, I was talking to this client and they talked in a mean way. It affected me. Whatever the situation could be, that maybe something they don't feel comfortable talking about to their boss.
mm,
And that is, I think, the number one benefit for the end user. That fact that they feel like they're heard, and they are able to get some feedback loop back. A human, even if you have 5 or 10 people under you, you can't do this on a daily basis by default. Like,
yeah,
you just don't have the time, and sometimes you also might not care. Like, not all bosses are
mm,
great, and we know that too. So that is the number one thing I say to people, that it's has tremendous benefits. Now, it should never be the like last resort. You always
mm,
have to be involved in the process. It's not just something you say, okay,
yeah,
I give my employees this tool and I'm not going to engage with them. I'm good. Of course not. You always have to be in touch as a human in the loop of the AI. But it also puts you in the forefront now, gives you the power with its data to understand where you need to help,
mm,
how, like, you're going to approach this conversation. Like, where does your employee lack? Do they lack leadership skills? Do they lack negotiation skills? What is it? So now you know how to prepare and give back to the organization better, more meaningfully. That is, like, high level, I think, the benefits and the way we should be treating AI coaching.
couple of really important points there, that I think is so crucial. The first one for me, that you've mentioned is really around self-reflection and self-awareness, because I do believe, and I know you mentioned, that senior people might be better at it. I think sometimes it's a skill that a lot of people never learn during the course of their career, is to really understand and observe, but what is happening to me. And I think especially in a world that is becoming a lot more complex, that's going to be so important for people to make sense of the environment and the actions and the activities. I can only speak from an HR point of view, but something we sometimes struggle with as a profession is this busyness syndrome, where
Mm.
you're running between fighting fires, not necessarily taking a step back and saying, but what happened to me there? What should I do differently? What did I do really well? And should I continue and grow? Second point you mentioned is I think there's this misperception that people have that AI is replacing everything, whereas in this context, it's complementing and it's a companion, it's a co pilot for you as part of making sure that you do make data informed and data led decisions whilst giving people access to something in real time on the spot immediately. And I think that's such an important thing for a lot of leaders and managers to take away, that AI is actually a very, very powerful avenue for you to utilize to optimize the way that you lead people. It's not going to replace you, it's actually going to work with you as kind of, your secret weapon that you can utilize to help and guide those conversations and make sure that they are meaningful within the right way. So I think it is just about teaching people to work with the technology as opposed to thinking that the technology is working against them.
I've been in the position both of the user and the decision maker for what tool to use for an organization. And I say that a lot, like learning management systems, experience platforms, these are great, but they are too hectic. Someone goes in, there's infinite content that you don't even know where to go, what to choose. You think you know what you need. Like an employee can say, "Oh, I want to be a manager, so I should take a leadership course." That is just you hope this is what you need. It's such a difficult way to I think approach learning. It has been, as I said earlier, a good evolution for the digital learning era, but it's not what we need. It's not enough. It's just a beginning. It's a catalog that should be there like a library, but you need someone else to tell you what you should pick from there. And so for us, going back to the adaptive and continuous learning through the challenges, it's a way for us to understand what skills someone needs to develop based on the way they reply. And so let's say you give an answer about adaptability that shows that you might need to work on that a little more. We won't bombard you every day with adaptability challenges. It's just going to be something more frequent. And that over time, we're able to track if you're improving or not. So the problem with those courses or with like just articles is that you have to have the awareness to go and find and pick every time what you need. So I found it very limited, unless you're just such a pro that you know. It's not always the case.
I think something that people sometimes also forget, and I'm going to use it specifically in the learning context, is there's ownership that also sits on the individual. In an organizational context, I need to create the environment, accessibility, etc. But there is ownership that sits on the individual pertaining to their own learning. And in the same breath, I want to mention that if that learning experience does not add up to something that is valuable for the individual, they are not going to engage with that. We talk to a lot of clients, and usually they ask us this question whenever AIHR comes in and says, how are we going to create this culture of learning where people want to learn, and content is not the only answer. There's also other components there that people need to and want to learn, I think as part of that. So this more involved process, this more really trying to understand what people are saying, I think is so important. I mean, something else we're seeing is that the relationship between employers and employees are changing, right? The relationship of trust is changing. People are not afraid to speak up and step up. We've seen a lot of employees almost acting a lot more like activists within the organization for things they care about, taking social stances about things outside and how the organization is behaving, and showing up in the public domain. And I think we're going to see a lot more about that.
I think an HR person has a lot of power within an organization. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I do believe it's the number one department. It has so much influence. Without the right people, you can't do anything, no matter the financial modeling you do. So to me, an HR professional needs to, as you said, understand first what they're trying to do. Is it that they're trying to shift their organization into a learning one? Is it that they want to maybe just increase the performance of people? Like, they have to know what is behind the reasoning of introducing a learning tool. Then finding the right tool, which should be very customer driven. Like, who are your customers? Is it the Gen Z? Is it the C-level? Do they have time? Is it micro learning? Is it long form content? Is it gamified?
No, I agree. And I think there's also around the fact that, learning from each other and, creating that peer to peer support network when we do have a lot of these conversations. And I really firmly believe that, we learn from each other and we learn with each other. Ioanna, I'm not going to get you let it go away before I ask this question around if you have to single out 3 power skills for the future that you think is going to be extremely important. And I know it's a difficult question. What would those be and why?
Starting with resilience, I think that's key. And because of all the changes we see today that's so prevalent, I would say resilience and adaptability are, something that goes hand in hand. Number 2 is excellent communication skills. And I'll dive
Mm,
into this a little bit because it's not just how you talk. It's how you talk in a way that others listen, which requires empathy. You need to be able to understand who you're talking to, read the audience. You need to be self-aware enough to understand how what you're saying comes out. There's so much that goes in communication that we sometimes undervalue the complexity of teaching this skill. It's
mhm.
something fascinating to me, especially, and for you to work in different countries, you see how people communicate differently and how that really changes the way they perceive the world and
Mm.
how they also see you. So it's huge. Communication, resilience. And if I had to choose a third one, let's see. I believe I would choose teamwork because it's the
Mhm.
only way we'll succeed, and the only way we'll create a better world than what we found. Working together, working with diverse groups, and working efficiently.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of food for thought there around what the things are that we do need to develop. And I think a lot of good insights there for people to think about their own career development. I think, especially when they are in the early stage. Ioanna, thank you so much for your time. I want to highlight a couple of key things from this conversation that I think really stood out for me. And the first one is the utilization of AI as a companion to democratize learning and give people access to learning and to knowledge. Second thing that really stood out for me was that it's not about the tools, it's about the holistic approach that we create, which ties into the habits, it ties into the way that it's presented, how people understand that this is about them. Third thing for me, really important, was that it has to be customer or consumer driven. That speaks towards the fact that content needs to be delivered differently, bite sized, needs to be in the moment. And then I also think the fact that human skills or power skills are the way of the future. And it's something that we have to bear in mind that as human beings, as technology emerges over time, those are the things that's really going to differentiate us in the world of work. Ioanna, thank you very much for sharing some of the insights and how you drive AI based coaching and development at Dextego. Any last words from your side or words of advice for the HR community listening to this podcast?
First of all, thank you very much. I can do this every day. I love talking to you always. If I had to leave them with something, I would say is that it's the first time in history, in my opinion, that HR has so much power to change a whole organization. It's not just changing like a recruitment strategy or just organizational design within the company. It's really, I think, one in a million opportunity of changing the company performance, culture, everything, and becoming an example for others.
I love that. I definitely think the future is bright for HR. A lot of opportunity on the horizon, and I think a lot of exciting times ahead. Ioanna, thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated. If people want to get in contact with you, where's the best place to find you?
Yes, you can go to our website, Dextego, Dextego. You can find me just on LinkedIn or by email. It's my first name at dextego.com.
Perfect. Ioanna, thank you very much and all the best, and we will chat again soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.